Welcome. Find a comfortable position. Let your body sink into wherever you're resting. Close your eyes if you wish. Tonight, I want to tell you a story. A story about the most extraordinary organism that has ever existed on our planet. Imagine, for a moment, a creature so indestructible that right now, at this very moment, it may be living on the surface of the moon. Not in some protected habitat, but exposed directly to the vacuum of space. To the deadly radiation. To temperatures that would kill any other form of life in seconds. Imagine something so ancient, it has existed for more than 600 million years. It witnessed the birth of complex life itself. It saw the rise of the dinosaurs. It watched them fall. And through it all, through every catastrophe that has ever struck our planet, it survived. This organism carries within its DNA the memories of species that went extinct millions of years before humans even existed. It holds secrets that scientists believe could revolutionize cancer treatment, could preserve vaccines without refrigeration, could one day allow humans to travel to distant stars. And yet, this organism is so small, you would need a microscope just to see it. So humble, it lives in the moss on trees, in the sediment at the bottom of oceans, in the soil of your backyard. This is the story of the tardigrade. The water bear. The moss piglet. The most successful survivor in the history of life on Earth. Let us begin our journey. The year is 1773. The place, a small town in Germany. A Lutheran pastor named Johann August Ephraim Goethe sits at his wooden desk, hunched over his brass microscope. The afternoon light streams through his window, illuminating a single drop of water on the glass slide beneath his lens. He had collected this water from the moss growing on the roof of his church. Just a routine examination. A way to pass the quiet hours of a spring afternoon. He adjusts the focus, and the microscopic world comes into view. At first, he sees what he expects. Specks of dirt. Fragments of plant matter. The usual debris of pond water. But then, something moves. Goethe leans closer. He blinks. Adjusts the lens again. No, his eyes are not deceiving him. There, moving slowly across the landscape of his microscope's slide, is a creature unlike anything he has ever seen. It is tiny. So tiny that without magnification, it would be invisible to the naked eye. No larger than a grain of sand. But under his lens, it reveals itself in wonderful detail. The body is translucent, like living glass. Barrel-shaped. Segmented into distinct sections, like a miniature insect. It has 8 legs, stubby and methodical, each one tipped with tiny claws. But it is the way it moves that captivates Goethe. The creature lumbers forward with a clumsy, endearing gait. Each leg reaches out, grasps the surface, pulls the body forward. Slowly. Methodically. Like a bear walking through a forest. Goethe watches this creature for hours. As the afternoon light fades to evening, he remains at his desk, unable to look away. He sketches it in his notebook, trying to capture its peculiar beauty. He makes notes in careful Latin script. Finally, he gives it a name. A name that will echo through the centuries. Kleiner Wasserbar, he writes. Little water bear. Johann Goethe had no idea that he had just discovered one of nature's greatest mysteries. He thought he had simply found a curious animal. A footnote in the catalogue of creation. He could not have known that this tiny creature held secrets, that would challenge everything science believed about the limits of life. For the next century, the water bear remained exactly that. A curiosity. A strange little animal that naturalists would occasionally encounter while examining drops of pond water. Scientists found them everywhere they looked. In freshwater ponds and mountain streams. In the ocean, both shallow tide pools and abyssal depths. In the thin film of water that clings to moss and lichen. They found them on mountain tops, where the air is thin and cold. They found them in tropical rainforests, where the heat is oppressive. They found them in the frozen soil of Antarctica. They found them in the deserts, in the rainforests, in your backyard garden. They seemed to exist everywhere. But nobody understood why they were so common. Nobody understood their secret. They were just there. A ubiquitous presence in the microscopic world. Unremarkable, except for their charming appearance. That secret would not be revealed until the 1930s. When a researcher in France made a discovery that would change everything. The researcher was studying tardigrades collected from dried moss. This moss had been sitting in a museum drawer for years. Completely desiccated. Dried out. Dead and brittle. The researcher was examining the moss for other reasons entirely. The tardigrades were an afterthought. Out of curiosity, he added a few drops of water to the sample. He expected nothing. The moss had been dry for years. Any animals in it should have been long dead. Their cells destroyed. Their proteins denatured. Their DNA shattered beyond repair. But then, the impossible happened. The tardigrades began to move. Not all of them. Some had truly died. But others, after years of complete desiccation, after years of being technically dead by every scientific definition, began to unfurl their legs. Began to walk. Began to feed. As if they had simply been sleeping. The researcher could hardly believe what he was seeing. He repeated the experiment. Same result. He shared his findings with colleagues. They repeated the experiment. Same result. The scientific community was stunned. This violated everything they understood about life and death. An animal could not be dried out completely, and then come back to life. It was impossible. And yet here it was, happening under their microscopes. This was humanity's first glimpse into the tardigrade's superpower. An ability so profound, it would force scientists to reconsider the very definition of life and death. The ability to pause life itself. To exist in a state between living and dying. A state science would come to call cryptobiosis. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Before we understand how they do it, we need to understand what they can survive. And what they can survive is everything. Let us start with temperature. The most fundamental requirement for life as we know it. Life exists within a narrow band of temperatures. Too cold, and water freezes. Cells rupture. Metabolic processes stop. Too hot, and proteins denature. DNA breaks down. Cellular machinery fails. For humans, the limits are quite narrow. We begin to suffer hypothermia at around -40 degrees Celsius. Our cells start to freeze. Ice crystals form in our tissues, tearing cell membranes apart. At the other extreme, we cannot survive temperatures above 50 degrees Celsius for long. Our proteins begin to unfold. Our enzymes stop working. These are the comfortable bounds of human existence. A range of about 90 degrees. 90 degrees out of the hundreds of degrees that exist in our universe. The tardigrade? It laughs at these limits. Scientists have subjected tardigrades to temperatures as low as -272 degrees Celsius. That is just 1 degree above absolute zero. The temperature at which atoms almost completely stop moving. The coldest temperature possible in our universe. At this temperature, everything stops. Chemical reactions cease. Time itself seems to freeze. It is colder than the depths of space. Colder than the dark side of the moon. Colder than anywhere in our solar system. The tardigrades survived. When warmed and rehydrated, they came back to life. Unharmed. At the other extreme, tardigrades have survived temperatures of 150 degrees Celsius. That is hotter than boiling water. Hot enough to sterilize medical equipment. Hot enough to kill every known pathogen. Again, they survived. A range of more than 400 degrees. From nearly absolute zero to temperatures that would instantly kill any other complex life form. And through all of it, the tardigrade endures. But temperature is just the beginning. Let us consider pressure. The crushing weight of the physical world. We humans live at the bottom of an ocean of air. The atmosphere presses down on us with a force of about 1 kilogram per square centimeter. We are so adapted to this pressure, we do not even notice it. But if we dive too deep underwater, the pressure increases dramatically. At just 10 meters deep, the pressure doubles. At 100 meters, it is 10 times surface pressure. Our bodies begin to fail. The deepest a human has ever dived without a protective suit is about 300 meters. Beyond that, the pressure would crush our ribcage, collapse our lungs, force nitrogen into our bloodstream, causing agonizing death. The tardigrade has survived pressures of 6,000 atmospheres. That is the weight of a 60,000-story building, all pressing down on an area the size of your thumbnail. It is pressure equivalent to 6 times the deepest point in our oceans. Pressure that would instantly crush a human being into paste. They survived. When returned to normal pressure, they simply resumed their lives. As if nothing had happened. And then there is radiation. The invisible killer. The destroyer of DNA. The force that unravels the very code of life. Humans can withstand about 5 grays of radiation before we face certain death. 5 grays is enough to break our DNA in multiple places. To cause our cells to stop dividing. To trigger massive organ failure. The radiation from the Hiroshima atomic bomb was about 2 to 3 grays for survivors in the immediate area. Tardigrades have survived exposure to 5,000 grays. 1,000 times the lethal dose for humans. Radiation levels found in nuclear reactor cores. Radiation that would turn human tissue into a genetic catastrophe within minutes. And still, they survived. Their DNA was damaged, certainly. Broken into hundreds of pieces. But they repaired it. Perfectly. Every strand put back together. Every gene restored to its proper sequence. Perhaps most remarkable of all was what happened in 2007. A space mission called Photon M3. A Russian spacecraft carrying a very special cargo. Among the scientific equipment and experiments, nestled in a small compartment, were several thousand tardigrades. But these tardigrades were not inside the spacecraft. They were attached to the outside. Exposed directly to the vacuum of space. Think about what that means. Space is perhaps the most hostile environment that exists. There is no air, no pressure. The temperature swings from -150 degrees in shadow to +120 degrees in sunlight. And these swings happen rapidly. Every 90 minutes as the spacecraft orbits Earth. There is deadly radiation. Cosmic rays that slice through matter like invisible bullets. Solar radiation, unfiltered by any atmosphere. Ultraviolet light so intense it breaks DNA bonds on contact. For 10 days, the tardigrades remained outside the spacecraft. Exposed to all of this. Subjected to conditions that would kill a human in 15 seconds. Conditions that would kill any known complex life form in minutes. When the spacecraft returned to Earth, scientists examined the tardigrades. 68% of them were alive. Not just alive in some barely functional state. Alive and healthy. Able to eat. Able to reproduce. Able to do everything a normal tardigrade does. They were the first and only multicellular organisms ever to survive direct exposure to the vacuum of space. Not bacteria in protective spores. Not simple single-celled organisms. But complex animals, with nervous systems and digestive systems and reproductive systems. How is this possible? How can something so small survive what would destroy everything else? The answer lies in one of nature's most ingenious tricks. A state of being that seems to violate the fundamental rules of biology. A state between life and death. A pause button for existence itself. Scientists call it cryptobiosis. Hidden life. Imagine you could pause your life. Not sleep. Not hibernation. But a true pause. A state where time stopped affecting you. Where you could remain unchanged for years, decades, perhaps centuries. Where aging stopped. Where decay stopped. Where you existed in perfect preservation. This is cryptobiosis. And the tardigrade has mastered it. When conditions become hostile, when water disappears, when temperatures become extreme, when radiation increases, the tardigrade begins a remarkable transformation. First, it starts to lose water. But this is not the gradual dehydration that kills most organisms. This is controlled. Deliberate. The tardigrade ejects 99% of the water from its body. It shrinks. Its legs retract. Its body curls inward, becoming compact, dense. As the water leaves, something extraordinary happens. The tardigrade produces special proteins. Lots of them. These proteins have a unique property. When dried, they form a glass-like substance. A biological glass that flows through the tardigrade's body, filling every space where water once was. This glass encases everything. It wraps around proteins, preventing them from unfolding. It surrounds DNA, protecting it from radiation and chemical damage. It permeates every cell, every organelle, creating a protective matrix that holds everything in place. The tardigrade is now in what scientists call a ton, a compact barrel shape. And in this form, something that seems impossible occurs. The tardigrade's metabolism drops to 0.01% of normal. Not slow. Not reduced. Essentially stopped. Its heart, if it was beating, stops. Its brain activity ceases. No oxygen is consumed. No energy is used. No metabolic waste is produced. By every measurable standard, the tardigrade is dead. But it is not dead. It is waiting. In this state, the tardigrade exists in a liminal space. Not alive in any traditional sense, but not dead either. It is in a third state. A state that challenges our very definitions of life itself. And it can remain in this state for an extraordinarily long time. Scientists have revived tardigrades that had been dried for more than 30 years. They have found them in ancient ice, frozen for thousands of years, and brought them back to life. There may be no upper limit to how long they can survive in this state. When water returns, the process reverses. The glass-like proteins dissolve. Water flows back into the cells. The body expands. The legs unfurl. Slowly, incredibly, the metabolism restarts. Within hours, the tardigrade is walking again. Feeding again. And here is perhaps the most remarkable part. It retains its memories. Its behaviors. Its learned patterns. The pause was complete. Nothing was lost. But cryptobiosis is not the tardigrade's only secret. Recent discoveries have revealed something even more extraordinary about these creatures. Something that sounds like science fiction. Tardigrades have been stealing DNA. Not from each other, but from completely different species. From bacteria. From fungi. From plants. From organisms that went extinct millions of years ago. When scientists first sequenced the tardigrade genome, they made a startling discovery. 17% of the tardigrade's DNA did not come from tardigrade ancestors. It came from other species entirely. Hundreds of different species. Most of them now extinct. This is called horizontal gene transfer. And while it is common in bacteria, it is extraordinarily rare in complex animals. But tardigrades do it constantly. Every time they dry out and rehydrate, their DNA breaks apart. And when it reforms, it sometimes incorporates foreign DNA that is floating in their environment. Over millions of years, tardigrades have collected a genetic library from extinct species. They have preserved genes from organisms that disappeared long before humans evolved. They are living museums of ancient DNA. And some of these stolen genes give them their superpowers. One protein, called SUP, damage suppressor, is unique to tardigrades. It wraps around their DNA like a protective shield. When radiation strikes, when chemicals attack, this protein absorbs the damage. It protects the genetic code. Scientists have taken this protein and inserted it into human cells in laboratory experiments. Those human cells became significantly more resistant to radiation. The implications are staggering. Could we one day use tardigrade proteins to protect cancer patients during radiation therapy? Could we use them to protect astronauts on long space missions? But the story of the tardigrade is not just a story of the past. It is also a story about the future. And in that future, tardigrades may already be living on another world. April 11, 2019. An Israeli spacecraft called Beresheet was descending toward the surface of the moon. It carried scientific instruments. It carried the hopes of a nation. And hidden in its payload, it carried thousands of tardigrades, dried and preserved. But something went wrong. A technical failure. The spacecraft's main engine malfunctioned. Controllers on Earth watched helplessly as Beresheet plummeted toward the lunar surface, accelerating, out of control. The impact was catastrophic. The spacecraft struck the moon at hundreds of kilometers per hour. It shattered. scattered across the lunar surface in a cloud of debris. And somewhere in that debris, the tardigrades were released. Thousands of them, in their dried ton state, scattered across the airless, radiation-bathed surface of the moon. Are they still there? Are they still viable? Could they, theoretically, be revived if water was somehow introduced? Scientists debate this. The moon is extraordinarily hostile. The temperature swings are extreme. The radiation is intense. There is no protection, no atmosphere, no magnetic field. But we know tardigrades can survive space. We know they can survive extreme temperature. We know they can survive radiation. If they are still viable, they would be the first Earth life to colonize another celestial body. Not intentionally. Not through any grand plan. But through accident and their own incredible resilience. This raises profound questions. If tardigrades can survive on the moon, can they survive on other worlds? Could they survive on Mars, with its thin atmosphere and cold temperatures? Could they survive on the icy moons of Jupiter or Saturn, where liquid water exists beneath frozen crusts? And if they can survive there, what does that mean for the spread of life in the universe? Could life travel between planets, frozen in meteorites, waiting for the right conditions to wake up? This is called panspermia. The theory that life did not originate on Earth, but arrived from elsewhere in space. For a long time, this theory seemed impossible. The journey would be too harsh. The radiation too intense. The time too long. But tardigrades challenge that assumption. They prove that complex life can survive the journey. That dormant organisms could potentially travel between worlds, waiting millions of years for the right moment to wake up. NASA is studying tardigrades intensely. Not just out of curiosity, but for practical reasons. If we are going to send humans to Mars, to the outer planets, to other star systems, we need to understand how to protect them from radiation. How to preserve them during long journeys. How to help them survive in hostile environments. The tardigrade may hold those answers. Scientists are already using tardigrade-inspired techniques to preserve vaccines without refrigeration. This is revolutionary for poor countries where electricity is unreliable. Vaccines that normally need to be kept frozen can now be stored at room temperature, using protective proteins similar to those tardigrades produce. They are developing new ways to preserve organs for transplant. Current techniques can keep organs viable for only hours. But using cryptobiosis-inspired methods, organs might be preserved for days, weeks, or longer. Patients waiting for transplants would have a far better chance of finding a match. And perhaps most exciting, scientists are exploring whether humans could one day learn suspended animation from tardigrades. Not full cryptobiosis. That might be impossible for creatures as complex as us. But even a significant slowing of metabolism could revolutionize space travel. Imagine astronauts on a journey to Mars, sleeping in a reduced metabolic state, consuming minimal resources, aging slowly. Or imagine far future missions to other stars, where humans might sleep for decades or centuries, preserved by techniques learned from creatures smaller than a grain of sand. The tardigrade does not care about our dreams of space exploration. It does not know it is teaching us. It simply exists, as it has existed for 600 million years, surviving, persisting, waiting. There is something deeply humbling about the tardigrade. We humans pride ourselves on being the dominant species on Earth. We have reshaped continents. We have split atoms. We have walked on the moon. We see ourselves as masters of nature. But the tardigrade reminds us of our fragility. It has survived 5 mass extinction events. 5 times, our planet has been scoured by catastrophe. Asteroid impacts. Volcanic eruptions that blotted out the sun. Ice ages that froze the oceans. Each time, more than 75% of all species went extinct. The dinosaurs, those mighty rulers of Earth for 160 million years, could not survive. They perished in fire and darkness. But the tardigrade? It waited. It endured. Humans have existed for only 300,000 years. A blink of an eye compared to the tardigrade's 600 million year history. We have not been tested by the great catastrophes. We have not faced a mass extinction event. We do not know if we could survive one. But the tardigrade has faced them all. And it will likely outlive us. When the last human has died, when our cities have crumbled to dust, when every monument we have ever built has eroded away, the tardigrade will still be here. Walking through the moss. Waiting. In about 5 billion years, our sun will begin to die. It will swell into a red giant, growing so large it will swallow Mercury and Venus. Earth's oceans will boil away. Our atmosphere will be stripped into space. The surface of our planet will become molten rock, glowing in the darkness. Every complex life form will die. Every animal, every plant, every fungus. Everything except, perhaps, the tardigrade. Hidden in the deepest parts of the earth, in cryptobiosis, waiting for conditions that will never improve. They will be the last complex organisms alive on Earth. The final inheritors of 4 billion years of evolution. And in a way, that feels right. That the meek should inherit the earth. That the small and humble should outlast the mighty. There is a lesson here. About resilience. About the value of adaptation over domination. About surviving through flexibility rather than force. The tardigrade does not fight its environment. It does not try to conquer or control. When conditions become hostile, it simply waits. Patiently. For as long as necessary. And when the storm passes, it continues living. Perhaps there is wisdom in that for us. We cannot control everything. We cannot dominate nature. But we can learn to adapt. To endure. To wait out the storms. And perhaps, if we are very wise, if we learn from these tiny creatures, we too might become a species that endures. That survives the catastrophes to come. That spreads beyond Earth to other worlds, carrying life forward into the future. But for now, as you drift toward sleep, think about the tardigrade. Somewhere near you, probably closer than you think, they are walking through the moss. Living their quiet lives. Carrying within them the accumulated wisdom of 600 million years of survival. They do not know they are remarkable. They do not know they are teaching us. They simply exist, as they have always existed, as they will continue to exist long after we are gone. And perhaps that is the most remarkable thing of all. Rest well. Sleep well. And know that while you sleep, the water bears are walking. Surviving. Enduring. Teaching us, through their existence, what it truly means to persist. Good night.